I haven't seen a tent do so much right in years, innovating in ways that we haven't seen with freestanding tents in a very long time. But the tent also makes some trade-offs that's gonna make it so that this tent will be terrible for some people. The Sea to Summit Telos tent is one of the most cool backpacking pieces of gear that I've reviewed in a very long time, and I wanna share with you everything that makes this tent amazing, but then also some of the downsides that make it so that it might not be for you. Starting off with what's good about the tent, a big thing is ease of setup. The tent comes in 3 separate bags, a bag for the poles, a bag for the fly, and a bag for the inner. And this makes it very easy to split up weight when you're carrying the Telos with somebody else. It's also really nice that you can separate and carry the fly separate from the inner. If it's raining or you have a lot of condensation built up on the fly, that allows you to keep your inner dry. To make setup a breeze, each of the corners and the hardware involved in setup is color coded. So you have blue hardware on the back along with blue poles for the pole structure, and then gray hardware and gray poles for the front of the tent. I really like this system. Sometimes tent manufacturers will make it so that the color coding is based on left or right side of the tent, but I find it a lot easier when it's based on front versus back of the tent. The way that you attach the fly to the main body of the tent is really easy and innovative. A lot of the time you're having to lift up the tent and then slide buckles underneath the tent. With this system, you just take the buckle, slide it in from the side, and then it gets tension really easily, and it's a very secure and easy way to set up the tent. So the tent is double walled, so you have a mesh inner and then a fly on the outside. With the double walled nature of the tent, if you do have condensation building up on the inside of the fly, then the mesh provides a physical barrier. It doesn't decrease condensation at all, but we'll talk about ventilation and how that decreases condensation in a little bit here. But what this entire double walled system allows you to do, along with the really innovative buckle system, is that you can set up the tent fly first. So what that means is that with the poles, you set up the fly first, and then you can crawl inside the tent and set up the inner from the inside. What this is really good for is that if it's raining, you don't have to set up the inner tent first and then have it getting drenched with rain before putting the fly on and then setting the fly up. If you've ever set up a tent that doesn't set up fly first before, you know how much water and rain you can get on that inner and how wet it can get before you get the entire tent set up. With the fly first pitch, you could also just leave the inner at home and save a whole bunch of weight and then just sleep underneath the fly. And if you have some trekking poles with you and you have it set up with only the fly, then you can prop up the entire system and kind of use it like a sunshade or umbrella. You can also roll the fly all the way up to the middle from both the front side and the back side. This can create a ton of ventilation, but also make it so that you can put the fly down and deploy it really quickly if it starts to rain. And if you only do the front side or the back side too, then you can also stargaze through the mesh of the tent wall. For venting, you have a lot of mesh on the inside of the tent, but then you also have this giant vent that you can either close up or have fully open on the top here. And these big scooped areas really suck in the air and create a lot of ventilation, which really decreases condensation. I've had the Telos out in some pretty condensation prone areas, and condensation issues were pretty much minimal, if not non-existent. Something you might have noticed, which creates a lot of amazing benefits for this tent, we're gonna get into all of them, is this brow pole. A lot of brow poles for tents, they kind of curve down, but with the Telos tent, the brow pole curves up. One benefit of this brow pole system is that you have a lot of room to get in and out of the tent, especially with the 3-person that I have here, but even with the 2-person that's over there, you barely have to duck in order to get inside of the tent. And then to get out, it's also really easy. You're not having to kind of crouch and do some sort of contortion scheme in order to get in or out of the tent. And then you can tell that the brow pole is really wide as well. It actually overlaps with the door. So if you have some light rain coming down, you can leave the doors open and you're not going to get rain inside the tent. What this wide brow pole also does is gives you a lot of headroom and shoulder room inside the tent. So if you're sharing it with someone else, you're not going to be bumping shoulders or bumping heads like you would with a tent that has a shorter brow pole. Because of the headroom, it also makes it very easy to open or close the tent from when you're inside. Sometimes you really have to be kind of like reaching and ducking in order to close or open the tent. But with this one, you can just kind of sit right at the edge and zip it up and down very easily. There are some negatives with this brow pole system that we'll get into once we start talking about what's bad about this tent. Another benefit with this tent is the size. So we have the 2-person on the right there and then the 3-person on the left. The 2-person is 53 inches wide at the head and then 43 inches wide at the bottom. And then the 3-person is 71 inches wide at the head and 58 inches wide at the foot end. You also get some additional foot room with the 3-person. It's 90.5 inches long. whereas the 2-person is 85 inches long. So you do have an asymmetrical cut to the floor of the tent, with the head end being wider than the foot end, which is not ideal, but it's not a big deal with these tents. You can still fit two 25-inch wide pads in them, no problem. With the 3-person, you can fit any 25-inch pads. Any large size pads will fit inside there, no problem. You'll still have tons of space. With the 2-person version, one of the 25-inch pads has to be tapered in order for it to fit. If you have two 25-inch wide square pads, then they're both not going to fit due to that asymmetrical kind of tapered floor. Both tents have lots of length to them. There's a lot more length than some other tents out there, but if you are on the taller end, then you might want that extra kind of 5 inches that the 3-person provides. You have tons of vestibule room on both of these tents as well, and even though they're very roomy tents, they don't weigh a ton. The 3-person weighs under 2 kilograms, which is kind of crazy, especially for how big of a 3-person is. And then the 2-person weighs just over a kilogram at about 1,200 grams. That's pretty crazy. These are lightweight tents. But that brings us to what's bad about these tents. And like I said, there's some things that are gonna make these tents so that they're not for everybody out there. And for some people, there's gonna be some pretty drastic deal breakers. Starting off with the top of the tent, that's created by the brow pole system. That brow pole has a lot of benefits, great benefits, but the issue is that it creates a flat top. And where this is gonna start causing problems is if you're in bad weather. If there's snow, this flat top is gonna accumulate snow, and this tent is not built for a lot of weights kind of sitting on top of this tent. So I would not take this tent out in wintertime when you are expecting snow, or even shoulder season if you're expecting snow, because the Telos is not going to hold up. Where this flat top also starts creating issues is if you have a lot of condensation built up in the tent. Like I said, I haven't really had condensation issues in a big way, but some people are going to be in areas that are a lot more prone to condensation. And if you have water accumulating and condensation accumulating on this flat top, it's not gonna run down the sides, it's just gonna drip straight on top of you. And I've seen some videos and talked to some people where this has been an issue for them. Building off of how well the Telos does in weather, it's also not gonna do very well in extreme wind. And that's because all of the things that make it a very roomy, spacious tent also make it so that it's gonna catch wind very easily. You have a lot of very big, flat parts of the tent on this fly that are gonna catch wind, and it's just gonna kind of create a lot of stress on the tent. Especially with the 3-person, you can see big panel right here, and then the front also has a big panel that's gonna catch a lot of wind. Even if you pitch it with the foot end into the wind, that's still gonna be catching a lot of wind because of how big the back panel is. Something that Sea to Summit's done that some people might find as a benefit, but I find kind of gimmicky, is that they make it so that the bags that you store the tent in can be used for different things. So the pole bag apparently can just be strung across the top of the tent and used as a light bar. So you put a headlamp in one side and it's supposed to kind of dissipate the light across the bar here, but I haven't really found it to be super useful, so I never use that. And then the other thing is that you can take the bags that you store the tent in and then attach them into the corners, and they're supposed to act as other pockets. But I find that the pocket systems in this tent are good enough. You have a pocket at either head end here, and then that's actually it. So maybe you do need these extra pockets. It would have been nice if Sea to Summit had put a big kind of roof pocket like you see on the Big Agnes tents, but we don't have that here, just these 2 side pockets. And then if you want to use the bags, then you can do that as well. Like I said, these tents are not made for extreme conditions. They're not made for mountaineering, for winter time, for extreme wind. You want to take them on comfy backpacking trips where you're prioritizing space, ease of use, and all the features that the tents have. The other big downside with these tents is price. The 2-person costs $600, and then the 3-person costs $660. That's up there in price with some of the high-end ultralight tents made up from Dyneema composite fabric. But you can often get these tents on sale, and I'll have links in the video description so you can go check out the tents for yourself and see what the price is at the time. If you want a tent that's gonna do well in the weather but also be more lightweight, then go check out this video right up here where I review the Durston X-Mid 2-person tent. That's a super roomy tent. It's very lightweight, but also very good in the weather. I've had it in some extreme rain and wind, and it held up awesome.